I'm Chelsea Globitz-Gabbio. Can't even say my own name, Gabbio. President at the Minneapolis Regional Labor Federation of the AFL-CIO. We're the umbrella organization for all the unions in Minneapolis and the West Metro. And then I'll just read names down the list. Anna. I think I got corrected on that last time.
Yes, it's Anna. Thank you for remembering. Yeah, my name is Anna. I'm the community manager at Fair State Brewing Cooperative, which is a cooperatively owned brewery in Northeast Minneapolis.
Eric.
Hello, I'm Eric Beaudry. I use he, him pronouns. I am a staff attorney at Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid.
Ashley.
Hi, I'm Ashley Boone, work in the Civil Rights Department.
Brian Elliott.
Hi, this is Brian Elliott. I'm the State Council Director for the Service Employees International Union.
Davis.
Yep, Davis Sensman. I represent the Main Street Alliance of Minnesota on the committee.
Who is guest? Could whoever's guest identify themselves? It may have default. You might not know your guest. It may have defaulted your name when you logged in. Okay, we'll come back to guest. Ginger.
Oh, you know what? I think. Sorry, Chelsea. I think. Nope, never mind. Ignore me. I'm not sure who is guest.
Ginger.
Hi, sorry, I just joined. Ginger representing 15 now.
Natalie.
Hi, sorry, I'm on my phone, so I have to click everything with my finger and not hang up on accident. Natalie Martin representing small business bookkeeping.
Thank you. Franklin. Frank, right? Can we say Frank?
Yep, that's
okay.
Good. Frank Reed, the Civil Rights Department. How are y'all doing this evening?
Veronica.
Hi, I'm Veronica Mendez-Moore, the co-director of CETUL, the Center of Workers United in Struggle.
Wade.
Wade Luneberg with Unite Here, the hospitality union.
Brian Walsh.
Brian Walsh, and I work in the Civil Rights Department.
Did I miss anybody? I would like to know who guest is. Sometimes Kadiho signs on with a phone. Could that be her?
No clue.
And I don't know Microsoft Teams enough to know how to message somebody.
Oh, Elise. Did we get Elise? Sorry if I missed that.
Hi, yes, sorry, I was having trouble connecting.
Hi, Elise. Welcome.
Hi, Elise.
Target.
Yes. Thank you.
We just said our organizations.
Okay.
Okay, Ashley, could I ask you to maybe help identify who the guest is, and then we'll keep going with the agenda, though.
Okay, I'm trying to see. I don't see it just by the name of guest, or am I tripping? Because I'm looking at participants and I don't see.
I think we got everybody.
But I'm just wondering who the identity is of the one that's name is just guest. Or is that only showing up on my screen?
Yeah, I don't see that.
I don't see that.
I couldn't see that one. I see that one.
I don't.
Okay. Well, it's all public meetings, so it's not a huge deal, but it is nice to know who's with us. Because we're a friendly bunch that like to say hi. All right, well, why don't we just move on to the agenda? And the first thing at the top is some announcements. First, we have an update from Brian Walsh.
Ooh, okay. You know what? The announcement that I have is really related to the hospitality worker right to recall ordinance, which I think we'll touch on later in the meeting. But working on that over the last few weeks, trying to get the presentation prepared for the city council last week, working with Frank on some of the finer points of that. We're really kind of starting to dive deeper into it and pull it apart, knowing that the timeline on it is a quick one, and just appreciate Wade's leadership on it. Other updates, Frank, you want to jump in? I guess we would be probably remiss if we didn't just mention something about the Derek Chauvin trial, because that's kind of overshadowing everything that we do right now.
Yeah, it's kind of the pink elephant in the room, isn't it? For the department, I mean, we're going to try to move things forward and support everybody in the office best we can. When we went through this the first time back in May, it was very hard for everybody. I mean, just in general, it's that way, but very hard in the Civil Rights Department. So we're going to try to support our folks best we can as we try to do this work. And it's going to be a challenge, but we will succeed in this. We'll all get through this together, and on the end of it, we'll be better for it. So we're just trying to adopt a positive approach moving forward. I think the key thing to focus on is that we do this together, and so that's where we're at right now, anyway. Looking forward to working with all of you moving forward, and as we see that light come in the end of the tunnel for this COVID thing, put this behind us so we get back to normal. So, if anyone have any questions, I'm happy to talk further.
Does anyone have any questions for our director? You have on here hiring update?
Well, so we have been able to create some space in the budget for some positions across the department. Our OPCR is going to be hiring a lot here very soon. Our sick and safe time folks are going to have a new employee in that area, so we're very happy about that. Things aren't slowing down, so to be able to get that extra help is going to be a major step up for us. And we're going to try to add some more FTEs in other places that are of need throughout the department, so that we can be more efficient in enforcing those ordinances out there that we've got to be proficient at enforcing. So we're moving along. And hopefully we can see some good outcomes later on this year.
And if you don't mind, Chelsea and Frank, if I could interject just a moment, because Frank is humble and he won't brag on himself. But as you guys remember, a couple of years ago now, you leaned and lobbied pretty hard, which is kind of what you do, and you're good at it, for additional staff and labor standards to help enforce the wage theft ordinance, which again was due to all of your hard work on this committee. Now going back years. In the meantime, there was a lot of crazy stuff and a hiring freeze and a pandemic, and that position got frozen. Like literally right before we were about to fill it, the hiring freeze. We had gone through the entire HR process. We had even done interviews, and then the hiring freeze hit, like before we could get the person in the door. And it has just kind of been sitting in limbo until Frank leaned into it really hard and said, you know what? Because there always has been this process of hiring waivers, and I don't know what all it involves, but it involves fighting with other departments in the city to say, hey, this is important. I know there's a hiring freeze, but you have to make this happen. For whatever reason, that hadn't happened until now, and the reason it did now is because Frank made it happen. So thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Brian.
Sorry, couldn't let that opportunity pass.
Well, it's important work. We got to get it done. Hopefully we can get some more people in there.
Great, thank you. Are there any organizational updates from any of the members on the committee they wanted to share with the broader group? Or not even organizational, but industry updates? Right. Feel free to jump in whenever on the agenda if you have anything that you wanted to share. So the next thing on the agenda is a short introduction to Eric. I don't think I'm the one that can facilitate that, so I'll hand it to you, Brian.
Yeah, Eric, I will spend about 30 seconds talking about you and then pass it over to you. But Eric can say a little bit more about, he is still on the line. Eric, are you there? Yes,
Yep,
you are.
I'm here.
Okay, EB. Yeah, Eric can say a little bit more about his work, but I'm really excited. He reached out, or actually was connected to me by, I can't remember who, I think it was
Terry Gerstein.
Yeah, Terry Gerstein, who some of you might be familiar with. She's the former New York State AG, I think, and is really active in sort of wage theft movements nationwide. She had connected me to Eric because he is working at our local, or well, he can say more about this, but essentially working in our local legal aid office, in particular in the area of employee misclassification as an independent contractor, and really coming at it in some innovative ways. And that is substantively really interesting to me as a wage and hour nerd and a lawyer, but also selfishly just adding enforcement capacity and the possibility of wage hour lawsuits on the obviously on the plaintiff side is the universe of people doing that at all in any way, shape, or form in Minnesota and in the Twin Cities and in Minneapolis is really not very big. So when you bring new sort of actual filing a lawsuit capacity, that is exciting to me. So Eric, I'm hoping you can say just a few words, and so you know, the folks on this call have been working on issues of wage theft really for years, and are some of the key stakeholders that made not only the wage theft ordinance possible, but also the state statute as well.
Well, thank you, Brian. Thanks for inviting me to join your meeting. It's great to be here today. And yeah, I want to acknowledge and thank you all for the organizing work that you've done to get the statutes that legal aid is able to use in our lawsuits to try and seek recoveries and justice for our clients. Without you, we wouldn't have jobs. As Brian mentioned, I'm a staff attorney at Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid. We serve clients primarily in Hennepin County, but we have a couple of statewide projects. We're one of a network of legal aid organizations across the state of Minnesota. And MMLA has recently made a foray into the wage theft space. We realized about the start of the pandemic that there was sort of a set of claims that weren't getting representation. Some of the larger firms were really only taking wage theft claims that were upwards of $500,000 or $1 million at stake. And a lot of the smaller claims, sort of one-off private firms, weren't taking those essentially for financial reasons. The sort of amount in controversy wasn't worth it for an individual lawyer to take on a case because they didn't think they'd get enough back. So legal aid sort of stepped back and said, this is a spot where we can really add our legal expertise. We don't charge clients for legal representation. We don't necessarily seek attorney fees for every case that we bring. So we're able to sort of take these smaller wage theft claims, which are extraordinarily numerous in the Twin Cities and in Minnesota, and try and advocate for justice on behalf of particularly low-income workers who currently weren't finding representation to bring their claims. In that wage theft space, I started at MMLA last October to focus specifically on worker misclassification as a subset of our wage theft work and related to our tax work. My work is primarily focused on working in the intersection of tax and employment law, using Form 1099s, which is what independent contractors receive from companies and people who hire them, to screen those forms for indicia of misclassification, to then possibly unlock a number of wage theft claims that might go unnoticed if they continue to file their taxes and continue to be treated as independent contractors. So I'm excited to be here sort of in this organizing space. I'm hoping to partner very closely with worker centers. Our wage theft unit and my project are developing a partnership with Setool that I think is going to be very exciting. I know Setool is here on the call, but to the extent to which our work can support and collaborate with the work that unions and worker centers are doing on behalf of low-income workers, and to the extent that we can support the workers that you all work with in their wage theft claims. That's sort of what we're here for. That's what we're aiming to do. And I'm really essentially looking to take away ways that our organization can support the great work that you all are doing.
Thank you. I put this in the chat, but it seems like every single time we take the time to do some strategic planning and look at the issues that are impacting our broader community, worker misclassification always rises to the top of that list. But because of these intersections, the path forward hasn't been very clear. So this is exciting. Do folks have questions for Eric?
I guess my question, hi Eric, this is Veronica from Setul. I know you've been working with Indira and some other folks on our team, or at least your organization has, and so that's been great. Folks are really excited about it. I'm curious, I guess I'm just wondering in this space, are you here today such that we're talking about how we're building a relationship? I put it in the chat, like as Elle said, going to be doing work around misclassification. Is there a partnership building with you all about that, or are there other things you're looking for from us and thinking about how we can just like advance this body of work that's just like so under like scrutinized, like it's just like it just goes, it flies under the radar so often, and it's such a big deal in so many different ways.
Thanks for that question, Veronica. The short answer is, I think in the long run, we would love to find opportunities for partnerships, collaboration, and then support for initiatives that you all are already working on. I'm a pretty firm believer that partnerships and collaboration come best when they're sort of already established relationships. So my goal for joining this meeting today was really just to introduce myself, my project, and MMLA's work, and get a sense of who all was in this space in your meetings. I'm hoping that this will be more than just a one-time interaction, and it can be the start of a more collaborative relationship and possibly developing initiatives, whether statutory or organizing, around worker misclassification. I'm not necessarily expecting that as a result of my presence here today, we'll walk away with specifically identified plans to move the issue forward. That would be great if we did, but I'm sort of here hopefully for the longer term.
Awesome, super excited to be building a relationship with you, both through Setul and in this space. Thank you.
Likewise, thank you.
And if you guys don't mind me chiming in once again, Eric and I were talking last week, and his ideas and insight about misclassification are particularly valuable because we were noting, as many on this call already know, part of the challenge of misclassification is that when a worker is misclassified as an independent contractor, it's not just one law being broken, it's like all the laws, which in some ways is creates a lot more potential damages for the worker, but also a much bigger challenge for the worker to enforce the worker's rights, because there are so many different agencies that one would have to go visit to address. You know, you have the potential workers' comp issues, but that's one place you would have to go and address that. Unemployment is another thing, you have to go address that. Overtime is the piece that often touches sort of wage hour. That's what you could come address at labor standards or at the DOL. And then Eric is what I'm excited about is he's looking at the tax liability, which I think is oftentimes the biggest liability, assuming that the worker wasn't unemployed, assuming that the worker wasn't injured, and you may or may not have some unpaid overtime, which may or may not be easy to actually prove. Perhaps the tax liability is the biggest problem at all. And I don't really know anyone anywhere that I would even be able to send a worker to deal with that issue. And so that's sort of the fact that it's so spread across all these different agencies and all these different areas of law is a challenge. And then the fact that perhaps the biggest liability there's no one out there that is easy to point to help a worker address that thing and tie all of these things together. So yeah.
If I could chime in just for a second, so one of our viewpoints on all of this is that around this work we can be so siloed. Everyone's got a little piece of the pie that they're working on, but in this environment right now where things are so challenged, if we're able to break down some of those silos, break down some of those walls, and everybody takes a little piece of something, and we're able to move that work forward as a group. Right? That's how we serve workers in Minneapolis the best. And so that's one of the things that we're going to try to do here moving forward. That's part of the vision. And having that relationship with legal aid, moving forward on this stuff, that's going to be big for people. But we're going to continue. We'll find those relationships in all corners of the city and all corners of the state to try to get this work done and to have it be meaningful and long lasting for people. So that's the focus. And this is one of the first steps, is creating that relationship with legal aid moving forward.
Thank you all. I think the last thing I would add is I'm super excited to explore possible partnerships with this group. The one thing I can sort of affirmatively offer right now is Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid's intake is available sort of for any low-income worker who has a wage claim. So if you all are working with workers and they may have a wage theft claim and they're looking to get either counsel or representation, we have sort of a screening process that our intake staff would be able to work through, but our wage theft unit is active and could serve as a resource really starting today and tomorrow for workers that you all work with, if it would be helpful. And I can paste the intake line in the chat so that folks have that if it would be useful.
Thank you. Any other questions from folks on the committee? Comments? Well, thank you very much for your time. We look forward to the future of this conversation.
Thank you.
Onto the agenda, the next item is updates on the Biden administration. And I would open it up for folks who have information to share.
So I admit I stuck that on the agenda. I don't want to get too bogged down because there's a lot we could discuss, and I could certainly nerd out for a while. But I just wanted to maybe just acknowledge, huge changes. Biden administration means so many things cascading down in the area of worker rights, and obviously the bill that looks like it's about to pass, the $1.9 trillion, is going to have a huge effect on unemployment insurance, and then a whole host of other things. And I feel like perhaps the Biden administration's immediate impacts in the areas of OSHA and worker safety is perhaps a whole nother discussion that we could look at on another day.
Other updates on Biden administration? Our own building trades executive director, the Minnesota Building Trades executive director, was appointed to the Department of Labor. I can't even remember which role. I was going to try and look it up quick, what her new title is.
I think she's, I think Jessica is the deputy of the Wage and Hour Division.
So we have a Minnesota contact in the federal DOL office now, and we can get you connected, Brian, and whoever, to utilize that resource. So
is that in the local Minneapolis office, or is that
and it's all work from home right now, but would normally be DC based. But
yeah, that's not the local, that's the federal.
Oh, interesting. Okay, cool, exciting.
She's the former interim commissioner of DLI here in the state before she was at the building trades, and was at the carpenters before that. So, or was it the laborers?
Laborers.
Sorry,
you don't want to mess that one up.
No.
Just kidding. Okay. Next on the agenda then is much more local, the right to recall ordinance.
Hey everybody, this is Dave Zaffron. I jumped on late, so
Dave, you're breaking up pretty bad.
about that.
Can't hear you.
For anybody who
Still can't hear you, Dave.
I'm trying to get closer. Is this better?
That's better. Yep.
Great. Hi everyone, Dave Zaffron, Policy Aide to Councilmember Steve Fletcher, who's authored the right to recall ordinance here locally. It's a pretty brief update, but it passed in the Public Health and Safety Committee last Thursday on a 6-0 vote after a public hearing. And it was a great public hearing. We had some really powerful testimony from folks locally who would be helped out by this ordinance. So that was good to see and hear. It goes to the Policy and Governance Oversight Committee this Wednesday as part of the committee report. And then the final vote this Friday by the full city council is final action. And as written, this will go into effect. Brian, double check me here, but I think it's June 1st, if I'm thinking correctly. And
May 1st.
Is it May 1st? My apologies, Wade.
I'll take June.
Ordinances mixed up here.
Dave and Wade. Little.
But retroactive to last year's, layoff period, effectively. And Wade or Brian, if there's anything else that you want to add, please go ahead and do so.
Well, Brian, your name was next to the agenda item. What did you want to say about this?
You know what? You should probably talk on it, Wade. I was you go first, and then I will just share my experience at the public hearing last week.
And I wanted to thank you and Andrea for a great presentation at the meeting last week. It was really helpful, I think, setting the table. So it appears that the ordinance may have the full consensus of the council come Friday. So that was really terrific news. At the PHS hearing, councilperson Paul Masano asked some questions around really around the funding of enforcement in the near future. And I think that, Frank and Brian kind of addressed what the future looks like there. And so asked and answered, but it was a good question. And otherwise, no amendments. I feel like we're going to have an impact on potentially thousands of residents of Minneapolis and an even larger number of workers that come into the city that live in our surrounding communities. And it's going to be great walking forward here.
Yeah, similarly, I thought the public hearing went very smoothly, and just appreciate both Wade and Dave and Councilmember Fletcher's leadership on this. From LSED's perspective, I mentioned Frank and I are really diving into the kind of the details of it, pulling it apart, putting it back together, trying to figure out how we're going to communicate it to community, how we're going to enforce it, and sort of trying to look forward and think about what roadblocks we might run into and all that kind of normal, the normal work of giving life to a brand new policy. But really, as I was sitting in the public hearing, it was, I was going to sound corny, but I was struck by, oh yeah, these are human beings and this is going to have a real huge, potentially huge impact. And I am personally excited to work with hotel workers and housekeeping staff, room attendants. I mean, that is like, man, just absolutely ground zero, as I mentioned in the presentation, ground zero of the devastation due to the pandemic and the shutdown. And those are workers that we need to be kind of moving to the front of the line in everything we do anyway. And this ordinance gives us an opportunity, gives me an opportunity to focus on that particular industry, that particular group of workers, and really try to dig in and make a difference. So I'm excited, and Wade, looking forward to work with you in the unionized hotels. Obviously, but also then figure out how we reach out to non-unionized hotels.
That's right, Brian. And I did learn a testimony the other day that it's a hard 2 minutes, and I got cut off at the at the end of my own testimony, and so I didn't get to thank Councilperson Fletcher, who I just think I'm consistently amazed at how serious he is about maintaining and raising labor standards here. Through doing it through real process and through tables like this, and I just think it's always really thoughtful on his part, and I appreciate that. And also, Dave was very helpful, without question.
All right, anything else on right to recall?
Well, I feel since we're having 11, I feel like I have to jump in with my 2 cents too. Brian was my ace in all of this. We spent a lot of time looking at this ordinance. I mean, the bottom line is like Brian was saying, like everyone's saying, it has the potential of helping a lot of people, and that's where we need to be. That's what the sort of ordinances we need to pass. Those that can have an impact in our community, and during this time, it's just needed so much. And also I was calling Wade early on, you know, and he took my call, and we had a couple of good conversations about how all of this will fit together. The idea of trying to make it a little bit more aggressive, so employers would see that and think twice. All of that went into, I think, a marvelous piece of legislation moving forward. We'll enforce it in a way that's going to be meaningful for people. But I wanted to thank Brian personally. That was really big what he did, putting up with me. Oh my gosh, I had all these questions, and he was patient, and that was needed. So thank you again, Brian.
All right, well, thank you, everyone. The next thing on the agenda is the Downtown Workers Council. So if we could get an update on that.
Yes, I can give us an update on that. So we had a meeting of the Downtown Essential Workers Council with the mayor and the 2 city council members that touched downtown. So Councilmember Fletcher and Councilmember Goodman, and also Councilmember Cunningham was there because he's, you know, over this committee. So, you know, we heard a lot of stories from workers that got at some of the like really specific issues that just like haven't been able to be addressed through some of the overarching, you know, policy and rulemaking, which was really good to be able to hear those specifics. So a couple of things that were that really, at the end of the day, I think we're lifting up as things that we need to figure out how to move on, and that potentially have the power to move directly through the mayor, given his emergency powers. The 2 main things there are an emergency extension of earned sick and safe time. I mean, essentially what's moving at the state level. And, you know, assuming, which I think is probably fair to assume, that we won't be able to move the strongest version of that through the state. If something moves, it'll be likely watered down. But the idea of this is that it just ensures that workers have access to that, because, you know, there are, especially Local 26 had folks that could testify, a number of folks talking about how they have quarantined like 3 times, and like you don't get paid for all 3 times right now, you know, you're like, you have to stay home. So if you've been in contact with somebody, and so you're forced to either, you know, lie about it and go to work so you can make money, or take the massive pay cut of not being paid for 2 weeks and staying home to make sure that your coworkers are safe and the community is safe, which is a tough position for low-wage workers to be in. So that's one main piece. And then the other piece is, you know, obviously right to recall was a part of our conversation, but that's already moving forward. But the other piece was about personal protective equipment and making sure that workers are provided with appropriate high quality PPE, specifically including masks. So, you know, we've talked about this before, that workers, you know, everybody in Minneapolis is required to be wearing a mask when they're out in buildings in public. And so that is, of course, a part of the COVID preparedness plan. Every single employer requires workers to wear a mask because that's legally mandated, but the employer is not required to provide masks. And so that puts the burden on a worker rather than putting it on the employer who is requiring it. So, that seems to us like a pretty clear, like, employers should be required to provide this for workers, and they're just not right now. And so that is another issue that kind of elevated to the top of the things that we want to see if the mayor can move on. So those were the two main things. The other pieces were conversations that I think are more like a conversation we want to have with Frank and that we've been having with Brian about, like, how do we make sure that we're doing the kinds of trainings, worker to worker education, and targeted enforcement where it needs to happen. Those are issues that were important to folks, to workers in the council, but that I think are things that we can work together here that the mayor doesn't have to necessarily like some big thing about. So that was that. We need to schedule a follow-up meeting to that one, but we've been in touch with the chief of staff, with Gia, and am hoping that we can really make some progress. I know that there's a lot going on in the city of Minneapolis, that the mayor is under pressure right now, but also there kind of always is. And so we got to make sure that we're doing right by the workers that are making downtown run. And I know it's also a particularly hard time for workers downtown right now because a lot of workplaces are shutting down for a month because of the fear of what's going to happen in downtown Minneapolis. And so there are a lot of employers that we've already heard of, folks who work like service work in downtown, that are just shutting down operations for the next month, assuming that the trial will create massive protests that, all of that. So that the update is like, that's what happened. And now we need to hear back from the mayor's office and are hoping to hear back soon from him and from his chief of staff about what their next steps are. And get another meeting on the books.
Yeah, and are there any next steps with the workers outside of the city process?
Yes, tomorrow evening there's workers will be meeting to talk also about next steps. Because I think part of this is about like, what's the conversation with the mayor, but then also like, what else do we have to do? Is there information we need to be pulling together? Do we need to be engaging more workers? Like, what else needs to happen in order to ensure that we can move forward productively on this?
Veronica, could you or anyone else just say a word about the emergency extension of Sick and Safe that's moving at the state level, and then whether or not you believe that has much of a chance of becoming law?
Yep. Brian, do you want to take that? Elliot?
Sure. The strategy is that we are trying to work this into end of session negotiations, or earlier if there's negotiations around COVID relief bill, which I think organizations like mine see very differently than the Senate majority, who recently heard a bill to just sort of reopen everything as long as there's a quote good faith effort to keep people from getting COVID. So just by means of update, the provisions of the bill at the state level apply to sort of two groups of people. One group is folks who did not have access to the federal Families First Coronavirus Response Act, FCRA, the leave provisions in FCRA, which are workers at employers of 500 or more, plus healthcare and emergency responders. And so that's one group that had no access to this leave. The other group are those who had access, but for which the requirement ended for employers to provide this leave. That requirement ended on December 31st was the last day of that requirement. So anyone who didn't use up their leave under FCRA by the end of 2020 is likely not going to be able to access it. Although, and it's tied very closely to what's happening at the federal level. At the federal level, they are proposing to extend the bill that passed the House and then the Senate would extend the tax credits for businesses of under 500 who offer this. Although again, businesses are not required to offer this provision under what passed federally because they couldn't extend that requirement under budget reconciliation. And that's sort of the path that they needed to pass the bill through the Senate. So, so the tax credits will be extended and will provide tax credits for an additional 2 weeks of leave starting April 1st. So in other words, you know, April 1st, 2020 through March 31st would be 10 days, and then another set of 10 days starting April 1st. The tax credits would be provided for through the end of September. So the real need for this bill is making sure that workers who are at large private businesses can get access to leave that they need, and that workers whose employers are no longer offering the leave, even though they are still eligible for the tax credit, can get that leave. And so that's what we're working to do. We have an amendment that's going in on Wednesday that's going to limit it to essentially it's still a large number of workers. I think nearly 50% of the workers in the state that are in what are traditionally considered more frontline positions, where they are, you know, the essential workers who couldn't stay home, like many of us here on this call. So hoping to get that passed and in negotiations.
Any questions for Brian on the state legislation? Okay, Veronica, anything else on downtown?
Nope, I think that's it. Oh, actually, I have a question. Do folks from staff on LSED have communication with GIA generally about the work that we're doing as a committee? Or is that, I don't know how that works.
Yeah, fair question. No, generally no. Occasionally yes. And I think Frank, you might be able to speak to it. I think you have some more regular communication with the mayor's office, I would assume.
Yeah, generally. So outside of our director structure, if there's something special that comes up, from time to time, we'll get direct communication from the chief of staff. She's one of my primary contacts. So if I have anything that comes up that I need to talk to her about, she makes herself available, and it goes both ways. We talked about the recall ordinance, for instance. She had some questions about where we were on it. And so that's generally how things work out within the department.
Okay, yeah, I guess I think that's one thing that might be helpful in moving this forward. Is I just like this committee, I know the committee as a whole has not really had communication with GIA. Jamie was our primary contact before she left. But I think it might be helpful for GIA to hear from you, Frank, about, or like to just check in about like, hey, how is this moving forward? Just so that there's, you know, someone else kind of checking in with her about it besides me. I think that would be helpful.
Sounds like a good idea.
Okay, great.
I'm happy to be the conduit for that.
Awesome, thank you.
If I could add a quick comment about the discussions around COVID paid sick and conversations at the city level, and I know there's also the state bill, is to also keep in mind that there are businesses who do offer this, and so allowing some section or sections there to allow for credit for that. For example, Target does offer this right now for our hourly employees, and it's not a one-time use. So acknowledging that there are businesses that do offer this through their own policies and trying to build in some type of credit.
100%, and that's actually built into the state bill.
I think I did see that, Brian, so I appreciate that.
Well, we appreciate you offering it. That's the whole point.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the hard thing with that is you acknowledge is it's never a one-time use, right? It's if you're exposed, it's the contact tracing piece, and then also if you are diagnosed yourself. So from at least Target's position, we've acknowledged that people would have to potentially use it multiple times. And so being able to offer that has, as you know, we are staffing our stores, allowed us to have some flexibility with that staffing so people can go out and take care of themselves. So it's a good idea to just know that there are businesses that are offering it and write the credit so that they can use the policy they've been using already.
Other questions? Sorry, I have a helper. This is Rose. She comes and goes as she pleases. Well, seeing none, I will give folks one last opportunity for any other announcements.
Well, I guess I did have a question. Brian or Elise, where could anyone, including myself, find the language of the proposed bill at the legislature?
Yeah, so the right now it is there is a delete everything amendment that we're proposing, and that is posted on the hearing. That's posted with the hearing that is happening in the House Labor Committee this Wednesday at 3 o'clock. So you can find that delete all amendment posted with the rest of the committee materials. But once it's once that amendment is passed, you'll be able to just find it by searching for House File 41.
House File 41?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Can we also make sure that the invite for the worker side conversation for the downtown thing, that invite gets sent to the whole committee? So if other committee members have people they want involved. All right, any other announcements from anyone on the group? Or questions? Anything anyone wants to see on next month's agenda? Okay. The invitation is always open. Brian, myself, we're always available to take feedback on the meetings and things that you want to see on the agenda. So please feel free to reach out from your viewpoint on the committee at any time on that. So if I don't have any other comments or questions, I think we can move to adjourn. I guess we will be adjourned. Thank you, everybody. We really appreciate your time.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good night. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.